Hello, and welcome back to the slideshow. It's definitely been a minute. I'm Dakota Jackson. I'm a trombonist and video game tester on the side, but getting back more into the trombonist. And I have a master's degree in jazz study from University of New Orleans, and I'm just interested in cultivating appreciation of the trombone.
And I'm Ben Wiltz. I'm a grad school dropout, an ex band director, and fishing guide who just happens to be a trombone enthusiast. I guess I need to go ahead and say that I'm a bass trombone enthusiast, just in case we don't touch
Yeah, for sure. I think we will though. So how you been, Ben?
that today. Man, I've been all right. I actually managed to go full time as a fishing guide. Right now, we're recording this. It is the winter, so full time looks a lot like unemployment. You pick up a part time job here or there, but looks a lot like unemployment because nobody wants to go fishing this time of year. But I've been well. I've been well. Finished up a season guiding over in Alaska last year, and I'm looking forward to doing that again this year. So yeah, a lot of stuff has happened, and I'm really looking forward to things slowing down a little bit and being able to jump back on the horn. It's always nice to catch up with you. I know things have definitely been different for you. What about you?
Yeah, man. I know, God, it's been so long since we've been on here, but there was the whole COVID thing, and then like this transition, and I was just like a full time video game tester, and there was a lot of things that were good about that. But you know what? At the end of the day, I really missed playing trombone, and really just missed talking about trombone. I missed you guys. I missed doing this podcast, and I'm getting back into it. I'm getting back on this pod. We will start releasing pretty frequently. I'm thinking at worst once a month, but probably twice a month, depending on how things go. And I'm just getting back to practicing. I got some gigs. I'm gonna play in Mardi Gras this weekend. I'm playing at Crew d'Etat, Iris, and then Demian. So that'll be an experience at least. And yeah, man, I've been good. I'm also sitting here and I'm drinking this smooth, delicious Guinness. Guinness is a delicious Irish beer for anyone who needs to chill and relax at the end of the day. I also want to point out that we're looking for sponsors, just completely unrelated. Uh,
If Wild Turkey would send me a bottle, I mean that'd be great. I do consume mostly Wild Turkey every single episode, so we're gonna need that.
so, is there what's the news this week, man?
So since we've been gone for so long, rather than pick current news, I just wanted to talk about some things that or just some something that happened over the course of 2021. It really puts into perspective too how long we've been gone. You definitely let me know about this when Curtis Fuller did pass away May 8th of 2021. I know he's a huge hero of yours, a giant in the trombone world, and I just know that yeah, he passed away this year, and also we lost Slide Hampton November 18th of 2021. I guess a little side note on Slide. Um, Back whenever I was first trying to listen to some more trombone music, entering in on that, I would just sit there and search trombone on Pandora. I was just a youngin, just searching trombone on Pandora. This is while I was still a tuba player. Lord forgive me. And Slide Hampton showed up a lot. And so I listened to a lot of Slide Hampton because I think he was one of the earlier guys to get into Pandora before it became I guess, the giant library that it has become. So, but yeah, Slide Hampton did pass away this year as well. So that's the news that we have for this episode.
Yeah, man. That's rough, and yeah, definitely Curtis was a hero of mine, and man, I think we even mentioned like we did a Curtis Fuller episode a while back. You should go check that one out. One of my personal favorites that we did, just like I was already such a big fan, but just like looking into him and doing the research was a lot of fun, and so yeah, go check that out too. And just obviously listen to their music. Him and Slide both. And we usually do the album rec at the end of the episode, but on this given news, The album we're gonna go ahead and do it now, and the album rec for this week is called Two Bones. It's a Curtis Fuller Slide Hampton album. It's got George Tucker on bass, Al Harwood on drums, Sonny Clark, one of my favorite piano players, on piano, and it's a Rudy Van Gelder album, so it's in the studio. And if you want a fun little tidbit, Slide Hampton plays a dude on that album. So nothing crazier than a left-handed trombonist playing a trombone with big loops on it, man. I mean,
On the note, what you just said about the Curtis Fuller episode we did, I do think it's important that as trombonists, we kind of get all caught up in the gear and everything like that. And it is good to do deep dives into the personalities in trombone as well. So I do say, give that a listen, but, just go look into these guys in general. Go Google these guys, read about them. Wikipedia is not that bad. There's a big list of sources and discography for you to go dive into on there too.
yeah, man, for sure. But on the note of not just being interested in gear, we know what you guys like. So this week is a gear episode. It's about slides, which I personally think is hilarious. Doing the slideshow on the slideshow. This has been a long time coming, but I mean, I even wore my my slide shirt. I have a shirt that says "Trombone players do it on the slide," which is insanely corny. I think someone got me this for Christmas. It's actually pretty funny. I don't know if Ben can see this, but there's like, it seems like it's a valve trombone up by the mouthpiece. There's just like a weird bulk or something. I don't know what the hell is going on with that thing, but yeah, man, slides.
Well, I've got to be honest. Coming from a convert from the valve, I am thankful every day for my slide.
Well, man, to start it off, like, don't worry if you're here for the nitty gritty. Don't worry. I did some rabbit hole digging, but we'll start off with just like some basic stuff, man. Like Ben, you want to tell us how the slide works? Like, what's up with the slide? What is a trombone slide?
So we're gonna be really, really general at first. So I'm going to talk about what slide we're addressing here. I'm talking about the hand slide, not to be confused with our tuning slides. Our hand slide that we use on a trombone is used to lengthen the instrument. Now, a regular B flat trombone is going to be 9 feet long. That's going to give you a series of notes if you were to buzz into a mouthpiece that you could play, starting with the pedal B flat, which would be your first partial, and then what we know is our concert B flat, just beginning of your normal B flat scale on the second partial, and then up to F, followed by B flat, and so on. Well, that is just in first position. That is with your slide closed. As you push that slide further out, you change the tuning of that horn. If you put it into what we arbitrarily know as second position, that is going to change that horn to an A horn. That horn will be essentially keyed in A. When you push it out to third position, that will be arbitrarily, that would be an A flat horn, and so on. So what that slide does is it actually enabled the trombone to be one of the first, probably the first brass instrument to be truly chromatic. Now, it wasn't necessarily used chromatically at first. I don't think composers at the time really knew the gem they had in their hands at the time. But people could definitely use the trombone as an instrument to play things like melodies pretty early on because of the slide giving us this kind of infinite continuum of combinations to play with these notes. And so that's something that before the advent of valves, we just didn't have. So that's the basic premise of a slide, is to really just connect all the dots between these pretty far partials that we have.
Yeah, man. I not to like down on valve trombonists. If you're a valve trombonist and you're still listening to the show right now, like after God bless you. But but like I think like
the exclusion in the title.
But I think like, man, like this, I mean, the slide is what makes the trombone, man. And it's funny, like I was recently talking to one of my friends who lives in Utah, and he's a trombonist, and he was like, sometimes I feel like people don't like get into the slide enough. Like, it's like I see all these things, people are like, oh, that's bad technique and stuff. He's like, but I want to do that because like no one else can do it. I want to lean into those sounds. And it was like, yeah, I was thinking, it's like, man, the best thing about the trombone is the slide, but also like the worst thing about the trombone is also the slide. Like, it's like it's a blessing and a curse, man. You could do a lot, but when you're in fifth grade and you're hitting fifth position, that's just no bueno, man. That's just a tough fruit.
Did you say fifth? Where's fifth position exactly?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I actually found out. I don't know how accurate this is, so don't stat check me and be like, oh no, dog. But I heard that like trombone has the highest dropout rate with like beginner bands, and like that's a little crazy to me because it seems like bassoon and a couple other ones are like insanely hard. But yeah, I can see that because man, like whenever you're in band and like a kid just holds down the second and third, on his trumpet, and then you're like trying to find fifth position, like I can see how that would be wild. Well, I was there. It was wildly frustrating.
Yeah, I was pretty selective on my trombone recruiting because of the risk of high dropout rate and our low amount of instruments. While a lot of bands would just put a bunch of kids on trombone in sixth grade and then keep the 3 or 4 that stick it through, is I had so few instruments I couldn't really take that approach. So I had to be very selective with my trombone. So I did notice that as well. It is extremely difficult for somebody beginning, especially whenever you see the other instruments progress so far, saxophone. But yeah, I mean, just trombone it's the slide is such a foreign concept compared to any other instrument. It's what makes us unique. Like you said, it's the worst part and the best part of it. I had a teacher one time whenever we were talking about playing fast passages. He said, a saxophonist, of course. Once again, sorry, I'm not really coming after saxophonists. But yeah, saxophonist was talking about playing these runs. And why don't trombones play these types of runs? They should be able to do it no problem. And the teacher just said, well, what if you had buttons that were 4 feet long? Now, I think that might be an exaggeration, but he raised a good point.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, that's why there's like only one John Fedshock, It's just a couple of guys who have like broken the ether and they do what they want, but it's not as common. Saxophone, there's a million dudes who can hit a lot of buttons, man. Yeah, man. It's funny, man, talking about the slide, I don't know if I would use this analogy with a lot of people, certainly not beginners. I think that would be weird, but um like I have a friend who plays upright bass and he was like trying to play the trombone and he was having some issues with like the partials, and I was like, homie, it's just like strings. Like, you're going down, it works fundamentally the same way as far as where the pitches are at, and the crossing partials is like changing strings. So I think that's like one way to look at it if you're completely foreign.
Yeah, I like that analogy. That actually helped me learn quite a bit on upright. I probably play upright as well as your friend plays trombone, but didn't mess with it a bit.
All right, well, hopefully somewhere in all of that you got how the trombone works. And I don't want to like hit too crazy with it because the people who like want to deep dive on it already know, and the people who don't would, I feel like, they're not ready for it. But like alto trombones are different, and like when you hit the trigger, like your whole like pitch of your instrument changes. And I think we've
Hey,
talked about that on the trigger episode.
actually, I am so sorry. That is something I left out. So we are diving. Sorry, folks. Um, anyways, yeah. So your instrument can change with your slide. If you add a valve to the equation, say an F attachment, for example, the distance between those arbitrary positions we talked about would also change. For example, with an F attachment, you would no longer have 7 full positions on your slide. Now, these positions are just the distance between notes that we hear. These positions aren't locked in solid spots on your slide. It's just where that note is in tune. So it's worth noting that yes, you'll get 6 positions, maybe 6 positions. That sixth position is right at the end of your stocking, really, to play like a low C or something like that with that F attachment. Also worth noting would be something interesting. If the rest of the instrument is longer proportionally, you're going to have some weird things going on with the slide because you still need that proportional length. So a soprano trombone should be 4.5 feet, which is exactly half the length of your tenor trombone, also known as the slide trumpet. The soprano trombone is. Well, because of ergonomics, the soprano trombone a lot of times is, or usually, almost all the time, really, is built in a way that the slide really only gives you 6 full positions. So in that case, that instrument would not be a truly chromatic instrument just because of the limitations. They sacrificed the ability to get that 7th position for ergonomics, for it to make it look and honestly feel like a regular instrument, even though really I can't think of a soprano trombone player besides Wycliffe Gordon. I honestly think he plays trumpet better, and I think he plays trombone better than
Yeah, I was
that
just
atrocity
thinking.
of an instrument.
Yeah, I was like, who plays slide trumpet besides Wycliffe? I feel like if you look up slide trumpet, you'll find like random dudes playing it on YouTube and then Wycliffe tearing it up. But he's just like a freak, man. I mean, he's just like just like a
I bet
musical
you
animal.
YouTube. Yeah, I bet you YouTube. Your results are going to be some guy reviewing some Chinese slide trumpet he bought in Wycliffe. Those will be the 2 results you see. So while that's not an important part of it, I do think it's worth noting that the trombone does have to fit specific parameters. The rest of the trombone has to be a certain length in order for that slide to have all 7 positions appropriately. And because of that, those 7 positions might not all fall in the same place depending on your instrument. So that's something worth noting. I think it was worth diving into that a little bit to talk about that. We'll discuss a little bit more about positions later. We're not going to dive too deep into that because that's I haven't really researched the positions part of that as much because they're real. That's pretty technical stuff. My band director told me third is by the bell.
Yeah, man. We'll talk about that in a minute, dude. But fight. I've gotten a lot of punches in the arm over my third positions. I'm not trying to say I had an abusive learning environment. But...
I had the same teacher. Taught me well.
So, Ben, you want to talk about like how we got to the current iteration of the slide, or just like the history of the slide and like all that?
The slide is a really cool thing. It's undergone very few changes. It's mostly agreed upon that the closest thing we have to the beginning of a trombone would be the Renaissance slide trumpet, which is kind of a weird S-shaped instrument that really couldn't be played chromatically like our current trombone. But I'm going to say that that's our first iteration of a slide that is meant to be moved in the middle of playing. This was as close as we had to that. Immediately after the slide trumpet, we come to the sackbut, which we might as well call a trombone. There's a whole argument on whether or not the sackbut is a separate instrument or just call it a Baroque trombone, or Renaissance trombone. Call it what you want. It's a trombone.
I think before we go on though, man, I think we're a hard it's a trombone pod. I mean, you go back to the history of the trombone. All right, I mean, I'd let this slide, but I do not acknowledge sackbut as a term. Just so you can go back and listen. But yeah, we do have a firm stance.
I don't want this podcast to be an echo chamber, but let's be real, folks. The instrument was pretty well established pretty early. And what I mean by that is the slide was not changed from its current form very much. The sackbut, or I'm going to call them Renaissance trombones or Baroque trombones. The early trombone had a U-shaped telescopic slide similar where the inside diameter of the inner slide was just slightly smaller than the outside diameter of the outer slide. Now, something worth noting is that these slides did not have a couple things that modern slides had. For example, and I think this is a huge one, is a stocking. Now, contrary to popular belief, the stocking is not your guide to find 7th position. It actually helps reduce friction. And the way it does that is, well, if you only have one part of the slide that is actually truly touching all the rest of the outer slide, that's not going to be very many wear points or many points for friction to occur. And because of that, you can move the slide more freely. So once you have the stocking on these trombones, they're moving much faster. Your trombone players were probably playing more technical passages at the point. Now, yes, we've all forgotten our water bottle or our lube or both and have struggled through with some pretty scary things. Listen, I've seen sixth graders hurt themselves coming from sixth position to first position because they were too ashamed to say, "Hey, do you have any slide oil?" But I mean, this really opened doors for the trombone world whenever we added that stocking. Another thing that we added was a spit valve, and that really just was a convenience aspect. I mean, in the orchestral world, for example, like trombones had plenty of time to rest, so they weren't gathering up spit in the middle of playing and then having the empty too fast. But the spit valve added some convenience and really ushered in. But other than those two things, there really weren't any major life changing advances on the slide besides what we know is just modern metallurgy, as materials changed and things like that. The slide has been the same, almost the exact same, all the way from the Baroque era. So I think that's pretty remarkable that the slide has managed to fight off valves, even though people said that the valves would take them over. Vincent Mock. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, man. I mean, Irby Green vibrato is like keeping us going, just knowing with the valve doing that. Speaking of vibrato, man, talking a little bit about technique and some stuff. I first of all, as we've said in the past, I'm not going to try and tell you guys what to do. If you want that, it's out there with like people far better than me who have a lot of opinions and a lot of thoughts. And I'm not teaching you guys, but just some general stuff. It's funny, like I think that there's some things that are pretty universal throughout. Like almost everyone, I don't really know if anyone is opposed to this, but like loose wrist is a thing, both like in the classical side of things, the jazz side of things, like whatever you're doing, like that's just huge. Like the idea is if you're non-trombonist out there, so I'm trying to explain this, like you're trying to make the movements of your slide, especially the rapid movements, with your wrist and not your forearm. You're just like moving through because that's rigid and not as smooth. But like other than that, like there is a little bit of debate. I've done some like interesting things that I've heard Joe Alessi did and some different stuff and philosophies. But when I was looking into this, one thing I just had never thought about that I think is kind of fun is like how we hold the slide. Like to me, I think there's like probably like there's a lot of weird things they tell little kids. I think one of them was like a gun or something. Just like the two fingers and the thumb. I think Ben might have something on this since he like is like introduced kids.
So I was taught. Now I learned. I guess a pretext. I was taught in college. Okay, I didn't really pick up trombone seriously until I got to college, and I was told the Spock method. You
Oh,
create
okay.
the we come in peace thing, and then you put that on the slide, and then put your thumb there. So I told my kids that. Now keep in mind, I didn't watch Star Trek, but I kind of knew that. I said we come in peace. Wow, I'm a live long and prosper. I guess never was a Star Trek
not
guy.
not a Star Trek
Cody,
pod.
yeah, Cody's dad, Cody and Cody's dad, all about some Star Trek. I'm not, but I heard that. I've seen it. I learned a way to hold my slide that way. Um, and I was told, certain things like your thumb never leaves the slide, things like that. I'm sure Cody will talk a bit about that thumb.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two things. There's two things with the thumb. I mean, first of all, I think to kind of reference what we were talking about earlier, we were joking around about is like when you're in beginner band, one of the things they do is they teach you to use your thumb to like find your position within the slide, which fundamentally is bad because you're like teaching yourself. Well, when you're touching your bow with your thumb over and over again, which if with what we know about like the oils on your skin stuff, not is not healthy for your bow. But outside of that, it's just like it's not accurate at all. It's the least scientific thing you can do to put your thumb up and try and figure out where you're at. And I think it's funny because like I try not to do it. Like when I was growing up and like in high school, no, like that's what I was taught, and that's what I just did. And then when I went to college, like my trombone teacher, he was just like, nah, he was like, no, dude, we're switching. And so like, man, it was rough. Like every single time I'd hit third, I just subconsciously put my thumb up and like like I was telling Ben earlier, like sometimes like if I did it enough, that led to a punch in the arm. By the way, I'm fine, guys. I don't want anyone thinking that I was like abused in these trombone lessons, but yeah. So like touching your thumb to the bell, and I'm not saying it's okay, but what I will say is I know, especially classical guys, so you cannot touch the bell with your thumb. And it makes sense. I agree. But I do know that there's a video of Dick Nash playing I Cover the Waterfront, and he sounds phenomenal. And that dude lays his thumb all over the bell. So I'm not saying that like it's not you shouldn't do it, but like also like it's not bad to be Dick Nash. That's all I'm saying. That's my argument.
So I think this goes back all the way to some early brass technique regarding uh, Arbin, one of the leaders in brass, I guess, pedagogy. And that was a lot of times certain bad habits, if your embouchure is not completely centered, he was a proponent for that being okay, saying it was detrimental to try to reteach that altogether. If you have an ingrained habit, let's say you've played the trombone for 12 years and you touch your thumb to the bell, you should be fine. If you're a sixth grader listening to this podcast, ignore the parts where we talk about the fear and probably just keep that thumb off the bell, and we'll save you from having to even have that conversation with your college professor years from now. But not going to make a world of difference. I mean, if Dick Nash can do it, but
Yeah. For sure, man. I do, like I said, I do think it's like fundamentally you shouldn't do it. And I know like Joe Alessi got a trombone made that had like the upward bend in the bill. I think famously Dizzy Gillespie style. I don't know like who's minted that, but to me that's like Dizzy Gillespie's thing, and everyone else is copying Dizzy. But like the upward bell, and like he would do the seminar, and part of the upward bell thing was like how much do we rely on the bell to like find our positions. And I can't, not to be like, oh man, look at me. I kind of think I actually don't that much because like when I solo, my eyes are closed and I'm thinking a lot. And so, but like I'm sure I do a little bit. And yeah, that's definitely a thing that like you got to work against is like you as you get older and become an adult on the trombone, it's using your ear and not your eyes or your thumb.
I was about to say I can tell myself a little bit here. As you know, I play mostly on my one bass trombone, and I'll be honest, especially once I start, getting those valves engaged, I use relationship to the bell like crazy. And so I imagine that upward bend would really throw me off, And that's, while I know I should use my ear more, I will say that is something like, you know, as we talked about before, those positions change like crazy once you start engaging those valves. And sometimes that, that gauge, that reference is nice. Now, I've never been a bell toucher because the first person to teach me trombone was the guy who was punching you in the arm. I mean, my arm also got punched lots. But yeah, so I mean, that's two different views. I also had more of a classical background. I didn't play as much jazz as you, and so I don't think I played with my eyes closed hardly ever, if at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, if you want a cool upwards bell guy while we're on it, because I just love giving out nuggets, go check out this dude, Wayne Henderson. I don't know if we'd ever do an episode on Wayne, because that's like kind of a deep cut, although I'm a little fascinated with him. He was in this group called the Jazz Crusaders, and definitely like some nice deep cut trombone stuff. But yeah, he was like a big like upwards bell. He's even got album, I think it's called Freedom Sound, don't quote me on that, but he's like got a black trombone with a red end bell, and it's got like an upward. That's like super cool looking. But yeah, the thumb thing, man. And the thing that's crazy is like this is like where things start differing, because like earlier you were saying like you were kind of taught like always keep your thumb on the slide, but like somebody who I know who is against that, who has like a different philosophy, is Bob Chesney, who if you don't know who Bob McChesney is, he's basically like Mr. Fundamentals. Like he's just got insane. He's like he has like one of the leading methods on doodle tonguing, and he's like a huge recording guy in LA, just a phenomenal trombonist. But he's like really big about popping off your thumb, especially for like quick hits to certain things. And I've actually gotten, I mean, from teachers even, I've gotten conflicting stuff. Like, I don't want to call anyone out, but like, I was told to always keep my thumb on, and then like I went somewhere else, and they were like, "Yo, especially when you're going to seventh position, pop it out," which seventh position can be its own thing. Like, I know that like a lot of shorter guys, like man, Ben, it's like are grateful for the bass trombone because those two triggers, he's not hitting a lot of seventh position.
That's true.
But yeah, like seventh position, how you get there can be interesting because I think when I say seventh position, most people listen to the podcast like, oh, B natural. But what if I'm talking about like pedal C or like those things? Like low, like seventh position becomes kind of a like a hall, and it's there's like some different methods on angling your body and your shoulder, and all that can get kind of crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, God, I feel like we've like went off on like a little tangent here, which is honestly great. I'm glad we're like getting into it, but yeah, with like the technique thing, I really hadn't thought that much about how people hold it. And there's this guy, Luke. Oh man, I don't, I don't want to mispronounce his name. He's a freelance trombonist in Chicago. Uh, it's like Malwitz. I don't know. That's probably not right. I think he's Irish. It's Malewicz. Maybe. You can look him up, but he's got. Yeah, it's a toughie. I'm sorry, but he's he actually did a video which I thought was super cool, talking about like when he transcribes people. Part of his process of like sounding as much like them as he can is emulating everything they're doing, and one of those being how they hold the slide, which is funny because that's like that seems like something obvious. Like if you were watching someone play basketball, that's something you'd be like, oh, what are they doing with their hands or something. But like I had never really thought about that. And it's like he has like a little one of his videos, he has like a little chart of some different guys, and uh like Conrad's was super what I would say normal because it's basically what I do. But it's interesting, like Frank and Carl Fontana both are one finger thumb guys, and which I thought was kind of nuts. I mean, that really made me think. Like, I think honestly, this is probably crazy, and this is like in my head. But like, if I was to go one finger thumb, I would feel so scared that I was gonna lose my slide. Like, you get used to things, and like slight things can really mess you up. And then Louis Manila had like a crazy one. His hand was way up, and it's just like none of them were too nuts. There was like one that was like almost like a full grip around. I know Curtis kind of has like a weird hand grip. Just something to look into if you've never thought about it. Like, and I mean, I certainly hadn't. So like, yeah, like I don't know if I would suggest even doing that, but it's just be interesting to be like, okay, this guy sounds like this. Like, what does his hand look like?
So that is interesting because the slide really provides a lot when it comes to terms of articulation, especially the sound between notes. And so trombone, probably more than any other instrument, at least in the wind family, that the way you hold it is going to affect your sound. I hear guitar players all the time talk about Stevie Ray Vaughan, how his tone is in his hands. Well, maybe not your tone on trombone is going to be affected by how you hold it, but for sure, I can see how they're saying, your specifically like your articulation. I don't want to say articulation because a lot of times those wind players say like tonguing is involved with that, but the nuances between notes, things like that, that will be affected by how you hold that slide. That ease in your wrist. A lot of times, kicking out your thumb might not seem like a big deal, but maybe that's going to get a different sound than have that rigid forearm or something like that, which some players will have. So that is interesting. I've honestly never thought of, hey, if I want to sound like this guy, maybe I should do that. And that's going to give me something to think about and probably go on a deep dive about later.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it before this either. It is a cool thing. I don't know, but man, once again, I don't want to be like, oh, you should do this because, like, by all means, like, if you have a teacher or like you want to like learn anything, like, don't use this as like the pedagogy pod. But like, yeah, like looking at how calm people are, man. Like, if someone is like super relaxed and like, it just like comes off different. I don't know. I say that, man. I actually I was just thinking about it, dude, and like Marshall Jokes, dude, he like looks like he is like uptight as hell, but I don't know, he's fast as all get out. So I don't. It's probably I don't know, man. Do your own research, but yeah, it's definitely something to look into. All right, I think on that note, we're gonna take a little break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the slideshow. So I think in the second half here, we're gonna get a bit more into the nitty gritty of you know the actual slide material construction, all that kind of stuff. Slides are like in general made out of the same thing as trombones. It's not that crazy, although they tend to be more often nickel silver than other stuff. But it's like brass, which I think we've talked about in the past, but it's like an alloy of copper and zinc. And then there's yellow brass, which just has like 70% copper and 30% zinc. And then red brass, which is got 90% copper, 10% zinc. That's why it's darker. And then nickel, which is kind of like its own thing. And I know there's like some different thoughts out there on like the effects these have. They're going to talk a lot about weight, so I think like the biggest thing to talk about is that nickel is in general, when they're making lightweight slides or lighter slides, they're made out of nickel, which when I was doing some deep diving on this, I discovered that nickel and brass have about the same density. So it's not that they're using that nickel is just lighter than brass. It's just that it's more like ductile. I don't know if that's how you say that. Ductile. Like basically you can stretch it thinner without it breaking. It's still like the same, like the materials are the same density, but you're using less of it, more or less. And I had like really no idea how that worked. I honestly, I'll kind of get into this in a second when I go into weights because I found out a lot of information. But like, I think, and maybe a lot of other people feel like this. Maybe you're just more hip to your slide than me because I'm certainly not the slide paranoid guy that Ben is. But we'll get into that. But like, I think for me, it's like I just kind of accept what I've been told. They're like, "Oh, this is a lightweight slide," and I'm like, "Sure." I've never once thought in comparison to what. So, but like, yeah, nickel is basically like it's frequently what is used to make them lighter. I will say I've had a chance to play on some kind of weird stuff. Like I played this horn when I was in Kansas City. I was just like checking out the factory. My wife was going to a concert, and it was like a Sterling bell with like a 8 inch. No, none of this is important. I'm just like a trombone there, but like so like they had a couple different slides on hand to like go through, and I like one of them was just straight gold, and then the next one was like gold, and then one side of it was like copper basically, or like a super red brass, not straight copper, but like a super red brass. And the guy was like, try this. It's like, it's crazy how different that sounds, huh? And like, I don't know, not to burst any bubbles. To me, it was like kind of the same thing. Like I couldn't. It was entirely aesthetic as far as I'm concerned. I mean, whatever you like. If you think it makes a difference for you, go for it. But yeah, like just in terms of talking about material, they're usually nickel, and then of course the inner slides are like always nickel. Like there's never like the inner slides are never like anything weird as far as I know. Maybe like if in fact, if you do know of something else, please reach out because I am extremely interested. But like all modern trombones and stuff that I know of have like nickel inner slides.
It's worth noting. So when he's saying nickel inner slides, he's usually talking about, I think, almost exclusively talking about brass with a nickel plate, which is usually done through electroplating. You'll notice that if you look on the inside of your inner slide, it will be that brass color. That's because the outside is nickel. And that's just to avoid having to put that extra layer on brass. That's an important distinction because pure nickel, that would be, I think, pretty expensive and heavy compared. Well, it'd be the same weight, but yeah, it'd be more expensive for sure.
Yeah, I almost moved off of this and just went into the weight stuff without talking about the elephant in the room that I know all you guys wanted to hear about is those good old carbon fiber slides. You know, when we started talking about doing a slide episode, it was like the first thing I brought up was like, oh, we got to talk about carbon fiber slides. Um, okay, I'll start off by saying like I've never played with one, so like my opinion on them is entirely based through research and like talking to friends. But whatever opinion you have on them, if you've played on them, you can consider that stronger right away. Um, but I found some kind of interesting stuff that I didn't even think about. Obviously, they're insanely light because carbon fiber just weighs nothing, and we'll get into that in a second with the weight stuff. Um, but there's a couple different ways you can get a carbon fiber slide. You can just buy a carbon fiber trombone, which is super expensive, and then get one. But you can go. I looked up like Butler, who's like really big in the carbon fiber game. You can get an outer slide for like 850 to 900, and you can do the full slide, which means he'll do the inner slide too. So you can basically tell him what trombone you have, and he'll make you an outer slide for like 850, 900. You can do the full slide for 1750 to 1900, basically. And like, I think that price variance is mostly like tenor to bass trombone. But I found out a lot of weird stuff I never thought about. Obviously, the lightness is the big thing. Um, and the internet was not very lukewarm on this. Like, there wasn't a lot of people who were like, yeah, it's okay. Like, people were either like, yeah, this is like better. I'm switching to this for sure. Like, this is end of argument. Or they were like, they're trash. And like, once again, like, whatever opinion you have is totally yours. I do know a dude who plays one in town is super cool. I hit him up on Instagram about his, and he was telling me that like he was a big fan of his. It took some adjusting to get used to though. Like, it was different. And one thing that I'd never thought about was lubrication with them. Like, it just never popped into my mind that maybe you just use normal lube or something. But they like, I guess there's some specific thing that Butler gives out, like for people to use. It's like some kind of like little compound or something. Once again, I really have no idea. But I found out some people don't even lubricate their slide. In fact, I found like testimonials from guys who were like, yeah, I tried lubing it and then I was like, it's worse. And they just don't. And that to me is crazy. Like, I can't even fathom not lubricating my slide. Uh, so that's nuts. And then the other big brands that I know of, I'm sure there's more out there, is like DeCarbo, who I think is Swedish. Definitely don't quote me on that. I think they're a European company, but DeCarbo, like as far as I know, just makes full trombones. And they'll make you one for about $6,000. And I will say before we get any further down, like the carbon fiber argument or whatever, I am a big fan of it existing in general, because if nothing else, like some people have metal allergies, and like the idea that they can like avoid all that with this material that's at least doing the job is like pretty amazing. I was in a big band with a trumpet player who played a DeCarbo trumpet because he had a metal allergy. But yeah, the big thing is like the weight. And then another weird thing that I found out about them, that this makes total sense, I just had never thought about it, is like they're hella sturdy. Like, they won't dent. They're not going to dent. What's going to happen is if you're rough enough with it, you'll just crack it. Like, you'll you'll just break it. There won't be any putting a dent in it. But they are, like, I guess some people choose them because of that too.
Yeah, carbon fiber is an interesting material. We see it a lot in the angling industry. It definitely helps cut down weight. If you got the cash, carbon fiber oars are the playing with. However, you know, they are known for their durability, which is great news if you tend to bang up horns, which is scary when you spent $6,000 on a horn to think about. Durability is not necessarily something you think about when you spend that much money on an instrument because you can't imagine ever hitting it, but realistically, things happen. So that's something to think about. Um, but yeah, the lightweight the durability combination is something that is just, I guess, peculiar to us people who just are used to playing on these, these big heavy instruments that if you touch them the wrong way might dent depending on whatever the metal composition is. So I haven't messed with carbon fiber myself, but I'm really excited to see, the advantages.
Hey, kind of unexpected, but this is the end of the episode because we ended up going in on this for like a full another hour. So I'm gonna break it up into a two-parter, and the second part will be out next week. I do want to thank you guys so much for listening. I mean, it means so much to me and Ben for that matter. I'm just recording because I do all the editing, but it's meant a lot for us to get back into this. Didn't realize how much we missed it and how much we enjoyed it. And not just this, but all kinds of trombone things I'm kind of getting back into in my life. And so this will be a part of it. We'll be getting on consistent episodes going forward. And if you have taken the time to listen to this whole thing, I mean, I'm serious. You guys listening is what has kept us going, and it means a ton. I'm not going to do an album recommendation because we kind of did that at the top of the show. But as always, thanks for listening and happy shitting.